Welcome to the Tyranny of Hope, where we bridge the gap between therapy and everyday life. I'm Wes Breedlove, your host, and this podcast is all about putting therapeutic concepts into practice. Each episode, we'll tackle real-world challenges, from setting boundaries to healing trauma, from mending relationships to overcoming addictions. You'll hear from counselors and learn practical strategies you can use right away. So whether you're in therapy or just focused on personal growth, you're in the right place. Let's turn hope into action and make real progress together. This is the Tyranny of Hope. Hello and welcome to the Tyranny of Hope, a podcast where we're gonna explore the complexities of addiction recovery with honesty and evidence-based insights. I'm your host, Wes Breedlove, and today we're diving into the challenging topic of porn addiction recovery. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This episode it's going to contain some mature themes and is intended for adult audiences. If you're struggling with addiction, please remember that this podcast, it's for informational purposes only and doesn't replace professional medical advice. So those of you who are listening and are grappling with porn addiction, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's hope and recovery is possible. We're going to explore this journey together with compassion and understanding. In today's episode, we're going to cover several key aspects of porn addiction and recovery. We're going to look at understanding the nature of porn addiction, the role of trauma in addiction, effective recovery strategies, as well as some unhelpful behaviors that we need to avoid. We're going to look at the importance of rigorous honesty, acknowledging our powerlessness. We're going to look at some concepts of sexual and emotional sobriety, as well as some faith perspectives on addiction and recovery. And we'll also include some practical next steps for those of you or those that you know who are struggling with porn addiction. So let's dive in. Friends, recent research shows that the age of first exposure to pornography has become alarmingly young. Studies suggest that children are encountering pornography at around 13 years old on average, but many are exposed much earlier. A significant portion, around 27%, first view pornography by age 11, and 10% see it by the age of 9. Now, these early exposures often occur unintentionally due to the accessibility of explicit material online, and this early exposure can have long-term effects. Research is indicating that the younger someone is when they first view pornography, the more likely they are to consume it compulsively in their teenage years and on into adulthood. And additionally, those who are exposed early are at a higher risk of viewing more extreme, violent, and degrading content, which is going to inevitably distort their understanding of healthy relationships and sex. Our children need help, y'all. Parents need to be equipped to guide their kids to navigate their most inevitable exposure to explicit content online. This is not the time to look away and just hope for the best. Today's topic isn't on parenting. It's on porn addiction. But let's begin with thoughts on just sex addiction in general. Dr. Robert Weiss, clinical sexologist and author of Out of the Doghouse and Sex Addiction 101, among other books, says that the nature of addiction is a desire to numb out and escape from emotional discomfort. This is true for every addiction. At the end of the day, porn addiction is not about physical arousal, it's about emotional escape. And Jay Stringer, a licensed mental health counselor, ordained minister, and author of a great book, Unwanted, he says that the irony of sinful sexual behavior is that it is actually against sex. It's not so much that we want too much sex, it's that we want too much anti-sexual behavior. He says, we know the beauty and power of sex, but we also know when we are pursuing a deviant imitation of a beautiful, erotic life. It is not possible to become too sexual for God. It is possible, however, to grow increasingly trapped in anti-sexual behavior. As a Christian, he also adds that the overwhelmingly standard evangelical response to sexual brokenness has been to address it through the lens of lust management and even declare war against it. He says this approach has oversimplified and trivialized a far more complex issue within human sexuality. Dr. Anna Lemke, psychiatrist and author of Dopamine Nation, great book, she offers insight into the neurological aspect of addiction. She says pleasure and pain are co-located. In addition to the discovery of dopamine, neuroscientists have determined that pleasure and pain are processed in overlapping brain regions and work via an opponent processing mechanism. Another way to say this is pleasure and pain work like a balance. She says, imagine our brains contain a balance, a scale with a fulcrum in the center, and when nothing is on the balance, it's level with the ground. When we experience pleasure, dopamine is released in our reward pathway, and the balance tips to the side of pleasure. The more our balance tips to and the faster it tips, the more pleasure we feel. But she says, but here's the important thing about the balance. It wants to remain level. That is, in equilibrium. It does not want to be tipped for very long to one side or another. Hence, every time the balance tips towards pleasure, powerful self-regulating mechanisms kick into action to bring it level again. These self-regulating mechanisms do not require conscious thought or an act of will. They just happen like a reflex. She says that beyond extreme examples of running from pain, we've lost the ability to tolerate even minor forms of discomfort. We're constantly seeking to distract ourselves from the present moment to be entertained. How true is that? So finally, this thought from Gabor Mate, from his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Not all addictions are rooted in abuse or trauma, but I do believe they can all be traced to painful experience. A hurt is at the center of all addictive behaviors. It is present in the gambler, the internet addict, the compulsive shopper, and the workaholic. The wound may not be as deep and the ache not as excruciating, and it may even be entirely hidden, but it's there. The effects of early stress or adverse experiences directly shape both the psychology and the neurobiology of addiction in the brain. And Patrick Carnes says that for the addict, there is no choice. No choice. The addiction is in charge. So those are just some general thoughts about addiction. But we're here to talk about porn addiction. And what is that? Porn addiction, quite generally speaking, is when watching pornography becomes a habit that is hard to break, even though it starts to cause problems in someone's life. It's more than just watching porn occasionally. It's when a person feels like they need to watch it, and their use becomes compulsive. And here's what that looks like. When someone's addicted to porn, they feel an intense, almost this uncontrollable urge to just keep watching it. Even if they've already spent a lot of time watching porn, they might feel like they have to, keep going. They have to. It's not even about enjoying it. It's about feeling that they can't stop. People with porn addiction often want to cut back or stop watching, but they find that they cannot. So they've lost control. They may set limits or make promises to themselves or to God. I'm only going to watch this 1 week or once a week, or I will never do this again. and then they break those limits all the time. Porn is also a way to escape or cope with uncomfortable emotions like stress, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, or boredom. And instead of dealing with these feelings in healthy ways, a person might turn to porn as a temporary fix. And this can make the emotional issues way worse over time. So let's say you've had a bad day or feeling super anxious. Instead of talking to someone or doing something to relax, you turn to porn as a way to numb those emotions. And it becomes your go-to whenever you're feeling down, stressed, or even just bored. Um, Another aspect of porn addiction is just like with other addictions. Over time, someone with porn addiction is going to find that they need to watch more extreme content to feel the same level of excitement. And what used to be enough just no longer satisfies, leading them to seek out new and more graphic material. So, another aspect of the addiction is the negative impact on life. Porn addiction starts to affect different areas of your life, including your relationships, your self-esteem, and your mental health. People might feel guilty or ashamed or disconnected from real life relationships because of the porn use. And it can also change how someone views sex and intimacy, and making it a lot harder to connect with a real partner. So you may notice, if you're an addict, that you're not as interested in spending time with friends, or that your relationships are suffering because you're choosing to watch porn instead. It might also affect how you see real relationships, making you expect or desire things that aren't realistic or healthy. Another aspect is it's going to interfere with your daily life. Someone with porn addiction might spend so much time watching that it gets in the way of daily activities like school and work and social events, and maybe like your sleep. The addiction takes up so much time and energy that other important parts of life get neglected. And then there's going to be the shame and the guilt. Most people struggling with porn addiction feel a ton of shame or guilt about their use. They may know it's affecting their life negatively, but they feel trapped in a cycle where they keep going back to it, even though it makes them feel so bad afterward. So, why is it so hard to quit? Porn addiction isn't just about willpower. It's connected to how the brain works. When someone watches porn, their brain releases dopamine, a chemical that makes them feel good. And over time, the brain starts to crave that dopamine rush, making it harder and harder to stop watching porn, even when it's against their values, their convictions, and their deeper desire to just stop. They want to stop. So the more serious, the more someone watches porn, the more their brain gets used to the dopamine hit, leading them to watch more or seek out more extreme content to get that same pleasure. The cycle is it's identical to other types of addiction, like drugs or gambling. And the bottom line is that porn addiction happens when watching porn goes from something that you were exploring or just casually looking at or you stumbled upon, and it becomes a thing that feels like a need, even though it is hurting you, killing you. Understanding the emotional and brain-based reasons behind addiction can be the first step toward breaking free and finding healthier ways to cope and connect. Now, I think it might be helpful if we address the differences now between why men and women use porn. Can we start by acknowledging the complexity of human behavior? The reasons that people, regardless of their gender, use porn are complex and personal. While there are trends in how men and women use porn, individuals have unique motivations, and we don't want to make blanket assumptions. everyone's experience with porn is different. And while men and women may have different reasons for engaging with it, it's important to understand those reasons without judgment. What drives someone to use porn often depends on a combination of emotional, psychological, and social factors. But let's look at some common trends. Research suggests that men and women may use porn for different reasons, but generally speaking, men tend to use porn more frequently and for immediate sexual gratification, while women may use it for emotional connection or exploration. However, these are broad trends and not universal truths. For men may often use porn as a quick, accessible way to satisfy sexual urges or as a way to cope with stress or boredom. And some may use it to escape from difficult emotions, loneliness, or relationship struggles. Whereas women, on the other hand, may be more likely to use porn for emotional reasons, such as exploring fantasies, seeking connection or intimacy, or processing complex emotions like shame or curiosity about their own desires. Women may also use porn to better understand their own sexuality. So while research shows that men and women may approach it differently, it's important to understand that everyone's motivations are personal, influenced by their own unique experiences. And so guys might use it, to relieve stress or, just disconnect. Women might use it to explore their fantasy, intimacy, desire. But both are ways of coping. They just stem from different needs. We also need to address and understand the underlying emotional and psychological needs between men and women. For many, porn is a way to escape or soothe unmet emotional needs. For men, they might use porn to deal with feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, stress. In some cases, they may struggle with vulnerability in relationships and turn to porn as an outlet where they can feel powerful and in control or avoid confronting deep emotional pain. Emotions that they were taught at some point as weak or just sissy or just too sensitive. And as I said earlier, women might turn to porn as a way to explore sexual fantasies, or they may be seeking validation, especially if they feel emotionally disconnected in their relationships or are unsure of their own sexual identity. They may feel they're not finding what they need in real life, and so they escape into fantasy world to meet their emotional needs. And their brains just don't know the difference because they're getting that same rush of dopamine and such. So at the heart of porn use for both men and women are emotional needs that are often unmet in other areas of life. Men might be doing it to escape stress, find a sense of power that they're not finding somewhere else, even in their own marriage, and women might be using it to explore desires or feel a sense of connection where that's missing in real life. Understanding these emotional motivations might help us to see the human side of this unwanted behavior rather than the action itself. All right, we get to practice curiosity and compassion instead of just immediately judging the behavior, because all behavior, in my opinion, makes sense once you pause and just explore what's underneath. Next up, cultural expectations, gender norms. These are shaping the way that men and women view and use porn. Men are often socialized to express their sexual needs more openly, while women may face societal pressure to suppress or feel shame about their sexual desires. So men feel societal pressure to always be sexually active or assertive, but this can possibly drive them toward porn as a way to fulfill perceived masculine roles. And in some cases, this can reinforce unhealthy views about sex or relationships. And women might face societal shame for their sexual desires or curiosity, leading them to porn use to explore their sexuality in a safe and non-judgmental space. So society plays a big role in shaping how men and women experience and express their sexuality. Men often feel that pressure to perform or appear sexually dominant, which can lead them to use porn as an outlet. And on the other hand, women may feel shame or embarrassment about their sexual desires, and porn gives them a way to explore these desires in private. So both genders are shaped by the societal messages that can make it harder to understand and express their sexuality in healthy ways. We also need to look at what is shared between men and women in the struggles and challenges of porn use. So while men and women may use porn for different reasons, there are shared struggles such as feelings of shame and guilt or secrecy. Um, Men and women both can develop a relationship with porn when they are unable to deal with emotional or relational problems. So it's important to recognize that behind the behavior, both men and women often experience the same kinds of pain, loneliness, or confusion. And understanding this can help us approach the topic with empathy and without judgment. It's definitely easy to label porn as sinful, bad, or wrong, but it's a lot more helpful to ask why someone is turning to it in the first place. So, for men and women alike, porn might be a way to cope with deeper issues like stress, loneliness, lack of intimacy, a longing for power, whatever it might be. But by approaching this issue with compassion, we can begin to understand the pain behind the behavior and offer support rather than judgment. I love what Jay Stringer says. He says that our fantasies are roadmaps. And then he goes on to say that you might not like the map you've been given, but to navigate your way out of unwanted sexual behavior, you will need to pay closer attention to what it desires to show you. One evening of deliberate curiosity for your sexual fantasies will take you further into transformation than 1,000 nights of prayerful despair. One evening of deliberate curiosity for your sexual fantasies will take you further into transformation than 1,000 nights of prayerful despair. That quote has stuck with me for years. We need to pivot now into the role of trauma. As we've touched on, trauma often plays a significant role in the development of addictive behaviors. A 2019 meta-analysis found a strong association between childhood maltreatment and addictive behaviors in adulthood, including problematic internet use. Gabor Mate, this renowned addiction expert, he emphasizes that the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. The question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. This trauma-informed approach in therapy is crucial in addiction treatment. It involves understanding how past experiences shape current behaviors and developing coping strategies that address these root causes. When someone experiences trauma in childhood, it can affect how they handle their emotions, their relationships, and stress as they grow up. This can make them more likely to use unhealthy coping mechanisms like watching too much porn. If a person goes through trauma as a kid, like abuse or neglect or witnessing violence, their brain can struggle to manage emotions later on. Feeling stressed or sad or anxious becomes overwhelming, and they have to turn to things like porn or other things to calm them down. Simplified, when we don't know how to deal with big emotions, we're going to look for something that makes us feel better quick. Pornography can give a short-term escape from sadness and anger and stress, but it doesn't solve the problem. Trauma also can mess with how we form close relationships When kids grow up in homes where they don't feel safe or loved, they may have trouble trusting people or getting close to others. This makes them way more likely to use porn as a replacement for real emotional connection. So if you've been hurt in relationships before, in those primary attachment relationships from your childhood, it can feel safer to turn to things like pornography instead of risking getting hurt again by real people. But this doesn't help build the healthy connections we actually need. Some people who experienced trauma in their childhood use porn to distract themselves from painful memories or feelings. Porn becomes a way to numb themselves from the emotional pain that they don't know how to face. Using porn can feel like an easy way to forget about difficult emotions or past experiences. But it's just a way to avoid dealing with the real issues, right? Which can actually make things worse in the long run. Trauma doesn't just affect emotions. It also changes the brain. These changes make it harder to control impulses or stop behaviors that feel rewarding, like porn. People who went through trauma may find it harder to resist things that give them that quick dopamine hit, that rush of pleasure, even when it becomes a problem. So trauma can mess with the brain's pleasure and reward system. It's going to make it easier to get hooked on things that feel good in the moment, like porn. So let's just put it all together. Childhood trauma is going to have long-lasting effects on how a person handles their emotions, how they form relationships, and how they handle stress. People who went through trauma might turn to porn as an easy way to feel better or avoid difficult feelings, but no doubt it's going to turn into a bigger issue. But understanding these patterns can help people to break that cycle and to find healthier ways to cope and to connect with others. Now let's turn to some recovery strategies. Okay, Stringer, and I think he's actually quoting Richard Rohr here, says, "If you do not transform your pain, you will always transmit it. If you do not transform your pain, you will always transmit it." So how do we do that? How do we transform this pain? Anna Lemke, she talks about that balance with the fulcrum, and how when we experience pleasure, dopamine is released in the reward pathway, and then the balance tips to the side of pleasure. And the more that our balance tips and the faster it tips, the more pleasure we feel. But the important thing about that to remember about this thing in our brains, this balance, is that it wants to remain level. It wants to maintain equilibrium. So it doesn't want to be tipped for very long to one side or the other. And so every time the balance gets tipped toward pleasure, there's a powerful self-regulating mechanism in your brain that kicks into action to bring it level again, which is an actual move toward pain. So Lemke's strategy is based on the idea that the brain processes pleasure and pain in the same area, and that the brain works to maintain that balance between the two. And when you overindulge in pleasure, your body naturally responds with pain. By pushing yourself to experience more pain, strangely, you can help your brain restore balance and become less vulnerable to pain. And she says that, one, the relentless pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain leads to pain. The relentless pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain leads to pain. She says that recovery begins with abstinence. She says that abstinence rests the brain's reward pathway, and with it, our capacity to take joy and simpler pleasures. She says that self-binding creates literal and metacognitive space between desire and consumption a modern necessity in our dopamine overloaded world. So, what does she mean by this self binding? All that is really meaning is to make it really hard for you to do the thing that you don't want to do. Self binding behavior for me, for instance, was to completely delete and cancel all of my social media apps. You won't find me on Facebook. You won't find me on Instagram or any other social media. I have this podcast that I've started, which it's not really social media. I mean, it is in a way, but it's not the for me a continual scrolling kind of thing. And I look at YouTube. I've got my YouTube account, but all the other stuff, it's just it's gone. It was a self-binding way for me to create space between desire and consumption. So I'd get all those hits of dopamine by just scrolling, right? And for me to create a place where give space between my desire and my actual consumption, I just had to kill it. So that was a self-binding move. Another thing she says, medications can restore homeostasis, but consider what we lose by medicating away our pain. Lemke, she is basically saying we got to get used to pain. We got to cultivate the capacity to feel pain so that we maintain homeostasis without the medications, if possible. Pressing on the pain side, it resets our balance to the side of pleasure. If you're going to feel pain, then you're going to feel pleasure. And you're going to feel pleasure, that will mean that pain will also come, and that will keep balancing out. And then she says, she gives us warning: hey, beware of getting addicted to pain, which is interesting, right? She also says that radical honesty promotes awareness, enhances intimacy, and fosters a plenty mindset. She says that pro-social shame affirms that we belong to the human tribe. Sounds like she's just saying, hey, look, shame isn't necessarily bad and evil. And I agree with that. I mean, if she's not saying that, then this is me. I've been with guys who say shame is just bad. Shame is just... And I'm like, well, there's toxic shame, but then there's shame that leads you like an usher at a funeral and sits you down, and its job is done, and lets you see what's really happening. It lets you see the reality of what is really happening in your life, right? And then there's guilt, and guilt is healthy too. So she says that pro-social shame affirms that we belong to the human tribe. And I think that what she also means with that is that when we have that shame, let's go to each other with it instead of becoming reclusive. And then in this 10th thing that Lemke says is, instead of running away from the world, we can find escape by immersing ourselves in it. So with these in mind, here's a breakdown of key recovery strategies for overcoming porn addiction. And I'm going to give some practical insights for each one. 1, seek professional help. Sorry about that. That is my dear dog, Maple. Big old German Shepherd. So, now that I've got her quiet, seek professional help. You're going to have to talk to a therapist or a counselor. And that's one of the most effective ways to tackle your porn addiction. A trained professional can help you understand why you're turning to porn and can help guide you in healthier habits. So a therapist is going to help provide personalized strategies for managing your cravings, understanding your emotional triggers, and developing better coping skills. If your porn use is tied to deeper issues like trauma, anxiety, depression, that professional is going to help address those root causes. They're going to use things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is going to be a super common therapy, maybe kind of the gold standard, that helps you recognize and change harmful thought patterns and behaviors. There's EMDR. If your addiction is trauma based, EMDR therapy can really help you process traumatic memories in a very healthy way. Specialists in sexual addiction are trained to help people struggling with porn use or other compulsive sexual behaviors. And I will give you some either links or suggestions below on how to find these kind of folks. Also, join support groups. Joining a support group gives you the chance to connect with others who are facing the same struggles. It's going to normalize this for you. Hearing from people who've been through what you're going through can make you feel less alone and offer hope for recovery. Support groups, they create a safe space to talk about your experiences without judgment. And you're going to learn from others who have successfully overcome their addiction, or they've got a lot of traction around around sobriety. And you're going to get some encouragement from people who understand what you're dealing with. What are some of these places? Celebrate Recovery, or Sexual Compulsives Anonymous, or Porn Addicts Anonymous, or Sexaholics Anonymous. These are all groups that you can find in your area or online, or you can do phone sessions. Online communities. If attending, in person feels overwhelming, there are online forums. NoFap or Reddit's Porn Free might be a possible place. What next? You're going to need to identify your triggers. One of the most important steps in overcoming your porn addiction is learning to recognize what triggers your cravings. Triggers are specific situations or emotions or thoughts that lead you to want to act out. Identifying these triggers are going to allow you to avoid or manage those situations that increase your likelihood of relapse. And by knowing what sets you off, you can create a plan to deal with those triggers in a healthier way. So what are some common triggers? Boredom. Having way too much free time or feeling unstimulated is going to can lead to cravings for porn. Loneliness. Feeling isolated, disconnected from others can make porn seem like a way to fill that void. Stress or anxiety. Porn is often used as a way to escape stress and manage anxiety. Negative emotions, feelings of shame, guilt, anger can drive people to use porn as a way to numb those emotions. So what can you do? You can start keeping a log of when you feel the strongest urges to watch porn. Write down what's happening at that very moment, your mood, your environment, and your thoughts. Over time, you're going to see a pattern that can help you identify your personal triggers. It's like I tell my clients, it's like a liturgy. It's like a church service. There's a pattern. There's a protocol. There's something going on that your brain gets triggered. It's like, oh, I know this situation. So there's in other words, it's a ritual, right? So learning the ritual that your mind and brain have developed around your porn use is going to be one of the earliest things you can do to not act out. 4, we're going to need to develop some healthy alternatives. Recovery isn't just stopping porn use, all right? You need to fill that void with something else. You're going to have to replace it with healthy behaviors. You need to find alternative ways to deal with stress and boredom and emotional pain, or hunger, right? If you're hungry, or angry. We have the acronym HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired are going to be often ways of realizing, oh, yeah. That's why I'm wanting to act out. So finding alternative ways to deal with all those things, including stress and boredom, is going to help you stay on track in your recovery. So when you replace an unhealthy habit like watching porn with something productive or positive, you are retraining your brain to crave healthier activities. This also helps you create a more balanced and fulfilling life that doesn't depend on porn, right? This is the life that you want. You want to be satisfied in your life without having to resort to pornography. So, what are some ideas about this, man? Get out and exercise. Physical activity is a great, maybe even greater than medication, to release energy, stress. Going to give you the same dopamine boost that porn might have provided. Okay, get some creative outlets. Channel those emotions into art, music, writing. Get creative. Express feelings, but in a positive way. Doesn't mean just go do something. I mean, you can express those negative emotions, but you can do it in a positive way. Get pro-social. Find some social activities. Build real-life connections by spending time with friends and family. Go get involved with a club. Participate in group activities. Go to church. Find your clan. And get engaged with others. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And then just one thought, maybe to practice mindfulness and relaxation. Practice relaxing. Practice breathing. Be focused for a minute on your own breath. That 4 square breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. Turn your mind on that air coming through your nose. Maybe give it a color. Is it, notice, is that air coming in? What's the temperature of that air? And then when you breathe it out, what's that temperature? Is there a different color when you breathe it out? Meditation. This does not have to be mindless, right? If you're a Christian and you've kind of felt that meditation has been kind of poo-pooed on, there is nothing unscriptural or about meditating. It's just that you are thinking and chewing on. You are like a cow chewing the cud of a verse or a quality of God, His goodness, His fatherly kindness, the love and compassion and tenderness of your Father toward you, not in spite of your sin, but because of it. You are the beloved. You are hidden in Christ. You belong to Him. So calm your mind and soul with thoughts like these. Reduce the stress that shows up. And then we're going to have to address these underlying issues, right? Many people, porn addiction for many people is a symptom. It's a symptom of deeper, unresolved emotional or psychological issues. And, it's important to address these root causes to fully break free from the addiction. This unwanted behavior is there for a reason. So when we get under the hood and check up what's going on in your heart, it's like, oh, there's some unresolved stuff going on here that I need to address. Porn is often used to escape from, trauma, anxiety, depression, relationship issues. So dealing with these directly, you're going to reduce that need to go to porn to cope. So if you struggle with anxiety or depression, or any other mental health condition, getting that proper treatment, therapy, medication, can help reduce the urge to use porn as a coping mechanism. Relationship issues. Porn use, like I've been saying, is often linked to difficulties in intimate relationships. So working on communication and trust and intimacy, non-sexual intimacy with your partner, can reduce the desire to seek emotional or sexual satisfaction with porn. And then, again, past trauma. If your porn use is connected with your unresolved trauma, like childhood abuse, neglect, abandonment, it's important to process that trauma with the help of a therapist. And that trauma can be reprocessed, and we can get that past in the past. That's the problem with trauma, is that the past isn't even in the past. So let's turn to a couple of concepts in addiction recovery that are crucial. And these two concepts are rigorous honesty and acknowledging one's powerlessness. Russell Brand, who's been really open about his own addiction struggles, he says that the mentality and behavior of drug addicts and alcoholics is wholly irrational until you understand that they are completely powerless over their addiction, and unless they have structured help, they have no hope. Now, of course, Brandt is speaking about substance addiction, but the principle applies to behavioral addictions like porn use as well. Rigorous honesty means being completely truthful with yourself and others about your addiction. And it's about facing the reality of your situation without minimization or denial. And as the saying goes in our many recovery circles, and as I say it in my office every day, you're only as sick as your secrets. Stephanie Carnes, a certified sex addiction therapist, explains that rigorous honesty is the foundation of recovery. It's about being truthful, not just about your actions, but about your thoughts, your feelings, and your motivations. So rigorous honesty means being completely truthful with yourself and others without leaving out details, sugarcoating, or anything, or hiding anything that might be uncomfortable or embarrassing. It's about facing reality as it is, no matter how difficult or painful it might be, and taking responsibility for your actions, your thoughts, and your feelings. In the context of recovery from addiction or personal growth, rigorous honesty is critical for lasting change. And here's why it matters and what it looks like. One, facing the truth about yourself. Rigorous honesty requires that you confront uncomfortable truths about your behavior, motivations, and the consequences of your actions. It's about admitting when you've made mistakes and recognizing patterns that are harmful and acknowledging when you've been in denial. Without honesty, it's easy to stay stuck in denial about the extent of your problem. For example, in addiction, someone might tell themselves, it's not that bad, or I can quit whenever I want, which only prolongs the problem. Rigorous honesty is about cutting through that self-deception and being real about the impact of your actions. 2, owning your mistakes and taking responsibility. Being rigorously honest means owning up, right? Taking ownership of your mistakes and your failures and your missteps without making excuses or shifting the blame. It's about taking full responsibility for your part in situations, whether in relationships or work or personal struggles. So if someone is late to an important meeting, instead of saying traffic was bad, rigorous honesty would look like admitting, I didn't leave on time. It's about being straightforward and not just trying to justify or minimize mistakes. Being honest with others. Rigorous honesty means being completely truthful with others, especially those with whom you are in a close relationship. And this means communicating openly about your feelings, your actions, and your intentions, even when it's uncomfortable. It might involve admitting that when you've wronged someone, or when you're struggling with something that's hard to talk about. So in addiction recovery, being honest with others, like a therapist or a sponsor or support group, helps you build trust and accountability. Dishonesty or hiding certain behaviors can sabotage your recovery because it's going to allow you to continue to live unhealthily in your secrets. It's going to mean living without deception. Rigorous honesty means I refuse to engage in even small lies or half-truths that may seem harmless. This includes avoiding manipulation, exaggeration, or omission of important facts. It's about striving to live with integrity in all areas of life. So instead of exaggerating your achievements or hiding mistakes to make yourself look better, rigorous honesty involves telling the full, unembellished truth. This builds credibility and strengthens trust, okay? We often find it really hard to be honest with ourselves. We all have that blind spot where we might rationalize bad behavior or avoid admitting uncomfortable truths. Rigorous honesty means challenging these rationalizations and being brutally honest with yourself about what needs to change. Why is this important? In recovery, self-deception can keep you trapped in those unhealthy cycles. Admitting when you're avoiding certain truths, like the extent of your addiction or the reasons behind it, is key to making real progress. When you practice rigorous honesty, you will build stronger and more authentic relationships. It's part of it. People are going to trust you when they know you are being completely open with them. It fosters that deeper connection because it removes the barrier that dishonesty and secrecy create. This means being honest about your feelings, even when it's hard. For example, instead of avoiding conflict by pretending everything's fine, rigorous honesty involves sharing your true feelings in a respectful way, which can lead to healthier, more honest communication. So many couples want that, but so many couples are also afraid to be honest. Practicing rigorous honesty can be liberating because it frees you from that burden of maintaining lies and half-truths. You don't have to constantly worry about being found out. Being honest with yourself and others can lead to greater self-respect and inner peace. Man, you want that. If you've lied about something, carrying that guilt or that stress of keeping that lie hidden can be exhausting. It's going to kill you. Rigorous honesty allows you to come clean, fix what can be fixed, and move forward with a clear conscience. Okay? So, in conclusion about the rigorous honesty, it means committing to full transparency, okay, with you and with yourself and others all the time. It's about facing the truth head on without sugarcoating or avoiding uncomfortable realities, whether in addiction recovery or relationships or personal growth, wherever in your life. This level of honesty is essential for building trust, fostering accountability, and creating lasting change. Acknowledging powerlessness. This is a key step in recovering from addiction as well, because it involves admitting that you can no longer control your behavior on your own. And here's why this is important. One, it recognizes the problem. By acknowledging your powerlessness, you're taking the first step toward recognizing that your use of porn has become something you cannot manage alone. Denial often keeps... I'm sorry, I just had that old joke about that river in Egypt. Denial. Anyways, so denial often keeps people trapped in addictive behaviors, convincing themselves that they can stop anytime, or that their actions aren't really a problem. Admitting powerlessness is the moment when you fully and when you finally and fully stop making excuses and see the full impact of your addiction. So an example is like someone might say, I can quit whenever I want, even though they've tried so many times and failed. Acknowledging their powerlessness is saying, I have tried to stop on my own, and I can't. I cannot stop on my own. I need help. That's number one. Two, letting go of control. When someone struggles with addiction, especially porn in this conversation, they often try to control or manage the behavior on their own, right? This might look like setting limits. I'll only watch once a week. We mentioned this earlier. Or making promises that they cannot keep. Acknowledging powerlessness means realizing that these efforts to control your addiction have failed and failed and failed, and that you cannot fix the problem with your willpower alone. It's not enough. Your willpower is a muscle, and it just doesn't last. It might get you through the next hour, but that will get weak, and you will fail, as you have proven over and over. Why is this important? Because addiction changes your brain, and it will make it harder to resist your urges. When you admit that you can't control the addiction by yourself, it opens the door to seeking help from others and accepting support from others, whether that's through therapy, support group, higher power like God and Jesus and the Spirit and the church. So it will put it'll take the pressure off of you, and you'll realize, man, I can't do this. This is going to open the door to help. When you accept that you are powerless over your addiction, you're going to realize that you need external help. This is the moment when people turn to support groups like the 12 Steps. In the recovery community, acknowledging powerlessness is the first step because it creates a mindset of openness and humility, allowing you to receive guidance and accountability and tools for recovery. In programs like SA, Sexaholics Anonymous, or AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, step one is about admitting that you're powerless over your addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. As long as you still think, I can manage this, there's just not a lot of hope. I mean, for some people there is, and they can manage it, and they can move on through life, but for the true addict, accepting their powerlessness, maybe when they've hit rock bottom, right, when life has become unmanageable, that's the point when things start to get better, because this turns the focus from trying to handle everything yourself and accepting that you need help and can't do it alone. It's going to break the cycle of shame. Admitting powerlessness can be a way to release the shame and guilt that often comes with addiction. Many people blame themselves for their inability to quit, thinking that they just need more willpower. But addiction, it's not about weakness. It's about how the brain reacts to certain stimuli and behaviors. And by acknowledging powerlessness, you're admitting that your addiction isn't just about bad choices, but rather something much bigger than you that requires help, right? This gives you the power to say, I need help. I can't do this. Something's wrong inside of me. And when you admit that the addiction is out of your control, you stop blaming yourself for every failure and start to see that the recovery isn't just about trying harder. Okay? The shift can reduce the shame and the self-judgment that keeps getting, heaped on you. Like I've said, man, that shame is just like an usher at the funeral home. Tell you where to sit, where you can then sit in your seat and process the reality of the problem. All right? You just don't let that toxic shame do that thing on you where it just doesn't leave you alone. Thank it. Thank you for showing me where I need to sit here, where I can now sit and process through what happened, why it happened, and where can I go from here. So once you admit that you are powerless, you open yourself up to new ways of thinking and acting. All right, the admission of powerlessness helps to break down that mindset that you can handle the addiction with the same tools or habits that contributed to it. You're accepting the fact that you have a cancer and you got to take your medicine. So acknowledging your powerlessness is essential because it's the starting point for real change. It helps you recognize the seriousness of your addiction. It helps you to let go of trying to control it on your own and seek the help you need. By accepting that you can't overcome the addiction by yourself, you create space for new strategies, support, and healthier ways of coping, which are crucial for lasting recovery. Acknowledging your powerlessness is the most empowering thing you can do. In real life, when a lust or sex addict is triggered, the power that they do have in that instant is to call on their sponsor, God, to call a member of their recovery group before they act out. They can pray for that person that they're lusting after, that no one else would objectify them today. They can pray, God, be for me what I'm looking for in her. God, be for me what I'm looking for in him. Or whatever, fill in the blank. God, be for me what I'm looking for in. That could go for food. That could go for whatever compulsive behavior you are experiencing. Equally important to sexual sobriety and all that is the concept of emotional sobriety. It's a crucial part of recovery. It's about developing a healthy relationship with your feelings. It's learning to sit with the discomfort without needing to fix it through any kind of addictive behavior. And as you work on abstaining from porn, you also need to learn new ways of dealing with difficult emotions. Again, it might involve therapy, practicing mindfulness, and other coping strategies. For many, faith is going to play a crucial role in their recovery journey. It's been said that porn addiction is a worship disorder. It's worshiping the created rather than the creator. So as we wrap up today's episode, just remember that recovery from porn addiction is possible. Recovery is a process. It's not an event. So celebrate small victories and learn from those setbacks. I love what Jay Stringer said. He said, God approaches us for our joy, not due to his disappointment in us. His heart is to exchange beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and praise for despair. See Isaiah 61, verse 3. There is no depth of shame that the love of God cannot reach. There is no story he cannot redeem. The paradox of the gospel is that our failures do not condemn us. They connect us. So remember, you are not alone in this journey. Reach out for help. Connect with others and take it one day at a time. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory worth celebrating in your progressive victory over lust. So thank you for joining me on the Tyranny of Hope. And remember, hope is essential, but it's the actions we take that lead to real change. And until next time, be gentle with yourself and